And we are back for another fun live session. Hey, everyone. Hey, somebody's already saying hi to me. Hey, Gaurav, glad that you are here. You are such a good direction follower because you've probably watched this program before, Gaurav. Well, hey, everyone. My name is Jeff DeVerter. I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist here at Rackspace Technology. And hey, we're here for another live session. So be like Gaurav and introduce yourself. Tell us where you are, where you're coming in from. I find all of that very interesting. It helps us build our little community here, and it helps me to know where you guys are. Hey, Elena is here. Glad that you are here, Elena. So guys, hey, this is our standard Tuesday, Thursday session. If you are familiar with it, you'll know that I'm going to give you some news about the cloud. You'll know that we're going to talk about some of the releases from the cloud and why they're important to you. We're going to talk about all three of them. And then, holy cow, do I have a treat for you. I have one of my, I love bringing my oldest friends around from all of the days. And today, Shane Young is going to be a part of this. Shane and I have known each other for, such a long time. And so he's going to come on, and his whole focus these days is all around the Power App space. Now, Power Apps is all about low code, no code. And so I would love for you to be thinking about your questions for Shane. We are going to have an amazing conversation. Shane and I said, hey, what are we going to talk about? And we never have any trouble filling the time. So we're going to dig into what's going on in this space. So here we got folks coming in. We got Israel coming in. We've got, Gaurav is still here. Looking forward to the cloud techs. Glad everyone is here. Reminder, introduce yourselves. We're all just here to hang out and spend some time and learn a little something about the cloud. Okay, with that, let's get into our program and we'll talk about what's happened in the cloud this week. And it starts with, let's push all the right buttons here. It starts with some news out of eWeek. Really interesting article. By the way, all of these links to all of these articles will be provided. I had him to send over to producer Daniel, but I never sent them to him, so he can't put them in the chat. But we'll get them for you. But here, this is what's interesting about the news out of eWeek. So in their article, they talk about how the public cloud growth was measured in 2020 at 40.7%. That's huge. We're talking about across all three major public clouds, and that's the amount that it grew in that time. Now, in that move out to it, there are, of course, a bevy of concerns. And we read about these hacks, read about issues more and more on what seems to be a day-to-day basis. And one of those areas that is the biggest avenue for hackers to get in and do bad things is all around identity and getting that right from the beginning. It's super important to have that worked out. It's super important, because it's where it all starts. Now, the other thing that I thought was really interesting about the article and a challenge, and I totally can appreciate this challenge, is that as more and more, we'll call it 40%, move out to the public cloud, I tell you what, they lose track of what they've even put out there. They can't distinguish where certain assets are running, if they're even running. They can't tell if they're vulnerable or not. So much to pay attention to out in the public cloud when you move those assets out there. And if you've been watching these on every Tuesday or Thursday at 8:30 Central Time in the morning, that security has become my new bell that I'm ringing most every day. And, that threat surface, that 40% growth in 2020 is a 40% larger threat surface for people to have to consider. So I'd love for you to go out and check that article out and really worry about what's going on. Now, also, is some news out of HP. Now, HP has a really interesting service. More and more, we're starting to see these companies come out with ways to help enable hybrid services. Now, HP, one of the things we think about them a lot is with printers. Now, they've come out with a new hybrid print service, which I thought was really interesting to help enable printing when you're working for your organization and being able to keep that stuff secret and private and, even enabled and capable. So they will monitor and manage the ink in the device, send it for you. HP Roam helps the workers really work from anywhere and be able to have secure printing, and so even being able to manage endpoint security. Now, endpoint security is huge because these devices that are now proliferating in our environments, and not just in our homes, but these environments in our homes that are connected to our offices, create an avenue of security issues, another threat attack surface that the bad guys can do bad things, and nobody likes those bad things. All right, so with that, let's move on to new releases in the cloud. I want to remind you, everybody, first of all, welcome you. Glad you're here, but make sure you're introducing yourself, who you are and where you are in the world, and get ready for your questions for Shane Young, arguably the leader in the Power App space and the low code, no code space. All right, let's start with our friends over at AWS. DynamoDB saw an update, granular control of audit logging. Now, as I said, it seems like almost every time, is these advances in cloud aren't always just new features, but they're going deeper and deeper. And a lot of times these new features and new capabilities, as they release region by region, give greater control over audit, which audit drives better security. Because if you know what's happening, you have the ability to then be able to secure what you have better. So, Gary, glad that you are here. Oh, United Kingdom. Glad to have our friends from the United Kingdom here. So, Amazon DynamoDB now provides you more granular control over audit logging by enabling you to filter these streams through the data plane and API activity in AWS CloudTrail. So that's cool. Now, also from AWS this week, I say this week, but it's really today. These updates are happening literally on a day-to-day basis, and the amount is staggering. So let's talk about an update. We talk about region by region and capability by capability. AWS single sign-on now available for in AWS GovCloud in the West region. GovCloud didn't make it onto the screen. Apologies for that. And but it's an interesting update as we see that single sign-on capability show up. Now, single sign-on is huge when it comes to what? Securing your data. All right, now over to AWS. We were there. Let's go over to Azure. General availability for Azure Sphere OS version 2109. Now, Sphere OS, as you know, is their Linux-based microcontroller operating system for IoT-based offerings. So that's a huge update for them. And IoT, as you know, is sort of taking over the world. IoT really helping enable and drive those cloud-based workloads at the edge. And as more of these capabilities make their way into the cloud, it gets more and more the center of gravity happening there, and enabling individual business users to do amazing things for their businesses without code. Yes, again, I am alluding to Shane's session coming up in a second. So Azure Database for PostgreSQL, they have a flexible server. Azure pipelines are now in public preview. Of course, implementing CI and CD pipelines helps ensure the consistent quality delivery of code out into production. And now Azure Database for PostgreSQL playing a big part of that. So over at our friends at Google Cloud CDN now supports custom named cookies and headers in the cache key as it goes out through, of course, their CDN. So each of the cloud providers have a pretty rich data network of both lit and dark fiber, and as they enable greater capabilities, it enables you to do more through your individual applications and stay native to the individual cloud without having to add third-party toolkit into there. So big update from GCP. And then VMware Engine will get an upgrade. Beginning in the middle of November of this year, VMware Engine will upgrade their VMware stack from version 7, update 1 to version 7, update 2. And NXT stack up from version 3.0 to 3.1.2. So this is super interesting, I think, because what we find is, as you move out to the cloud, not everything has to become native, cloud native on day one. It should be a part of your application's roadmap. But you can pick up those VMware workloads and run them natively across pretty much any of the cloud providers. And there's great value in moving your workloads out into the cloud, getting that data into that single location. And in doing so, it allows you to utilize more tools that are in the cloud. Now, as I've been talking about, I've got my good friend Kent Kingery. Not Kent Kingery. Kent was on Tuesday, but I got Shane Young coming up. So why don't we bring Shane to the stage? And everyone, if you are not familiar with the lovely and talented Shane Young, you really should be. Now, to get a hold of Shane Young, you can reach him out at Shane's Cows. Shane, let's start with the cow story. Your Twitter handle is that. Your everything is known as the Shane as the cow. Take us back there for just a second as a point of grounding.
Oh my goodness, Jeff, that is like 2004. And,
I know.
Since I'm only 29 now, I must have been, I don't even know the math, but I was very young back then.
Yep. Labeling things with farm animals.
Clearly. So back, I guess, at 2004, when I first got in the SharePoint space, basically everyone in the SharePoint space at that point was a developer.
Yep.
I was the first admin-y type person to show up, maybe the second, but very early. And so, back then we did things in SharePoint. We scaled with server farms.
Exactly.
So somehow along the way, my blog became the SharePoint Farmers Almanac.
All right. I see where we're going here.
Yeah. So that was kind of already a persona. And then as part of training, I did a lot of, still do a lot of training, but in class to fill time, I always told cow jokes, high quality cow jokes. Like what do you call a cow with no legs? Ground beef. Nice. High quality stuff.
Highbrow material.
Yeah. So I was a little late to Twitter, and when I was trying Twitter, obviously Shane was gone at that point. I don't know why they didn't just give it to me, but they didn't.
Jack Dorsey.
Shane's Cows was just a silly guess on that day, and it's stuck ever since. It has zero context these days, but
That's all right. It is who you are. But let's talk about that. So as you think about the SharePoint space, so you made the name for yourself in the guy who had written in fact, as I sat in one of your training materials, you brought up that installation manual and said, this is my opus. This was your coup de grace at that point. Oh, one of your many, many books. Oh, I wonder who wrote a chapter for that. Might it have been me? But at any rate, what was really interesting about the SharePoint explosion is it enabled individual business people to solve some of their own problems. Now, very limited fashion, task lists, calendars, these sorts of things. But time has certainly evolved. We don't worry about server farms in the SharePoint space really as much anymore. We are focused on how do we use SharePoint to just do things. And what's interesting about it is it's now connected to everything else. But up comes along this pesky little capability in the Power Platform suite. And that's really where you've gravitated to in the past years. In fact, your business now, Power Apps 911, that's who you call when you have a problem, is Power Apps 911. But what has caused this explosion in your estimation, and why it is making such a difference in business?
It's a solid question. I think a lot of it just comes from the fact that people want to be able to solve their own problems, right? Everyone is too busy. Everyone is overworked. Everything is crazy. And so forever and ever and ever, as an IT, or if you wanted to problem solve, it's kind of two solutions. One was package software. If you want package software, then you had to bend your business to follow the process that the package software would do. Or you went the custom route with either engaging with your own IT or an external partner. But then it was like, all right, we're going to plan for 6 months. We're going to build for 6 months. And a year from now, you'll get the first version of this to say you hate it. And it just wasn't working.
Right.
So forever, as long as I can remember, people have been solving their own problems with Excel and Access, InfoPath, right?
Yeah.
Those are old words. But those people now said, well, what? I want to build an app. And so the low code world evolved and said, hey, we're going to give you a platform that feels a lot like on day one of my Power Apps class, it's like, hey, you use PowerPoint skills to drag things around, and then you write Excel formulas to make the things fly. And people are like, I've been doing that stuff for 20 years. I can do that. I'm like, very cool. So
exactly. Well, and I think what's helped cause this explosion is the fact that so much more data is now centric. In the case of Power Apps, we're talking about a Microsoft platform, is in that Microsoft suite of things. It's in Azure. It's in accessible to that tool set. So you've got the data there, and now, you find that when in the old days you had access, you had Excel where all the data on the logic, everything resided in that one place. Well, now it's just sort of there. Now we just need to glue it together in a way that makes sense. So what type of solutions are you seeing people build utilizing this platform?
Oh man, everything in the kitchen sink. It is. We see people like timesheets, a lot of the paper-driven processes. If you think about one of our very first power apps, it was a oil and gas company up in Canada, and they're like, "Hey, we got 400 people out in the field that all fill out little time cards, little pieces of paper. Somehow that gets into their truck. Somehow in their truck it gets to the office. The office, then someone transcribes their chicken scratch, and that's how we pay people. And it's a terrible system. So we're like, hey, we can make that an app. Well, phone app. They open up like, hey, I worked on this project. I worked this many hours. Go. And all of a sudden, it was like we went from something that might take them days to find out how much time had been worked on that project to basically the moment that man or woman walked off the job site, we knew what they had done for that day. So we got a lot more analytics.
Well, and you use that word analytics, and that so what you're saying is now that we have that live data, now there's so much more you can do. Now they know how to run their business. They can make decisions.
Yes, and what's even crazier is if because once again, we've always done whatever the system allowed, right? So in the case of a piece of paper, we wrote in the boxes on the piece of paper. That was their goal. But as part of that, I was like, all right, well, what else goes into this? And on a job site, for example, they use safety equipment. They might use a truck. They might use a shovel. They might use, you name it.
Yeah.
And all of that stuff is legitimately billable back to the client. It's part of the service. But forever, they basically recorded maybe a third of that stuff they used because there wasn't a mechanism. So now as part of the timesheet process, before you can tell me how many hours you worked that affects your paycheck, you got to tell me what safety equipment you used on the job site today. So now all of a sudden this app paid for itself in spades because now they're getting all the things properly billed back to the client instead of trying to figure out, did I use the shovel on Wednesday or Thursday? And, so by reimagining it and not saying, hey, we're beholden to the card or we're beholden to the packaged software, we can make this follow our business process. These people are printing money by investing in a low-code app. Like mine exploded.
Well, and the thing that gets so powerful in these low-code apps is let's use that phrase, low code. Go back to the Excel days, go back to the Access days. You don't need heavy development skills. The skill you need, and this is what I always say is the most valuable skill in the business, is you need to know the business. If you know the business and you have an easy way to then implement a thing, almost as easy as pulling out a piece of paper and designing a little form and say, go fill this thing out. Now you can do that in an electronic way.
Yes, Jeff. Oh, it's like you took the words straight out of my mouth. I love it.
It's like we share a brain.
I know. Have we been told that before?
I think we have.
But, and one of the other big things here, the other major win, because, if you think about it, like, well, I could have done that InfoPath back in the day. That's true, right? Like we evolved. We did Excel, we did Access, we did InfoPath. But one of the things that Power Apps and the Power Platform as a whole has really blown the mind of, and I think this is something you and your viewers will appreciate, is instead of InfoPath or those other ones, we lived in a box, right? You can kind of
constrained, absolutely constrained.
Power Platform just passed 530 connectors, right? So we can talk to Azure, we can talk to Office 365, we can talk to AWS, we can talk to Google, we can talk to anything with an API basically, right. And still low code, no code, right? So you're not just building in a bubble anymore. We have the whole cloud at our disposal. And now all of a sudden, instead of just saying, hey, I got a simple little app that I got to deal with the data, it's like, oh, I want to pull in some Salesforce data. I want to, write all this back to my AWS backend. I don't know why you'd have an AWS, but that's a different story. But you could push the data, right? 530 different default connectors that are just there for your use. And then a custom API connector that if you wrote your own new database service, great. Does it have an API? Great. We can talk to that too.
So Shane, that's huge because, as we started this conversation, my spidey sense, I could just hear people out there, their wheels grinding going, oh, but we're in GCP. Oh, but we're over in AWS. And now you're talking about this Azure thing. Well, let's put this into perspective. If you're in AWS, chances are your email is still on Microsoft and on Azure, as we call it. And so it's running in Microsoft 365, which means your Office suite is 365. You know what powers the Office suite and what application rides there? Well, it's Power. It's the Power Platform stuff. So regardless of where those cloud assets are, and we're all multi-cloud, and I love the example you gave. So it could be coming out of Workday, could be coming out of Salesforce, could be coming out of, fill in the SaaS blank, 500 and whatever the number was you said, bits out there of connectors being able to get in and pull that in. So don't feel constrained. In fact, especially don't feel constrained if you're running on-prem. Your custom API, API connector solves for that.
Yeah, Microsoft has the on-premises data gateway. And the important thing I think you mentioned was that Power Platform is part of Office 365. So to Jeff's point, if you guys have Office 365, you already have a license for Power Apps and Power Automate. It's paid for. You have it. Why are you paying for some other low-code, no-code thing that talks to 3 data sources? And yes, it's pretty, and yes, they have a great website, but it doesn't, 530 connectors is just, there's just not an argument that Power Platform is the best low-code, no-code platform.
Let's take the religious argument off the table for a second. And in my opinion, I think that the low-code, no-code, and I'm not shy about this opinion, the low-code, no-code space about where we are with robotic process automation. No, there's not robots, but there are bots, electronic things that watch for stuff to happen and then do things. Shane's example of the timesheet was a manual thing where they pull out their phone, they put their information in, and off it goes. But if you think about that whole process, in the old days, Betty would receive those slips back in the office, and Betty would type them into whatever their accounting process is. And then that accounting process would then move over into, in some cases, payroll, in some cases, these other systems. But that's the RPA piece of what happens in the background. Now that, that Betty out in the field who's running the forklift, enters in her information, and now all the back-end systems can fire off on their own. So RPA is actually limiting and getting rid of thousands upon thousands, millions of hours of wasted time. And I'll go back to, because I think the point needs to be remade, and that is that when we talk about Betty being in the office and filling out that information, that's a minimum paid job. That's an hourly job. That is a no benefit job. That is a dead end job, and it's a job that's dying because of these capabilities. But the moment Betty learns how to use Power Platform, or fill in your blank on the tooling, let me just put it back to you. When somebody's looking for a job in this space, and they know how to use the platform. And by the way, if you know how to use PowerPoint, you know how to use these drag and drop tools, you're a good user in Excel. How much is this person, what is the salary range for this type of an individual, Shane? You're hiring these daily.
Yeah, I mean, they're walking in the door. I would say that, knowing nothing, you can get 70, right?
$70,000. Yeah. Incredible.
With almost no skills and just the right personality and the right aptitude for wanting to learn, 70 walks in the door, right? If you got some major chops, you can get in there and really do. The sky is the limit of what you can make. It's
right. So guys, if you're watching this and you're the Betty and you're typing things in, but you're bored and you're watching me, most people are bored when they're watching me. But you want to advance your career, shameless pitch. Shane's over here for me. For Shane, the training program, there's a wealth of information on the YouTubes. So how do we find you on YouTube, Shane?
Just go out there and type in Shane Young Cloud. Easy way to find me. Or basically, if you type in Power Apps anything, it's really hard to
not see that smiling face.
Yeah, this face, right? And Chewy, right? I can't even. Chewy's right there. Chewy's kind of my co-star, and that's a great point. I want to, I know we're going to run out of time because you and I can talk hours. But one of the things that I want to make sure that everyone understands is that the majority of people in this space are not IT, right?
No.
50% of people at conferences about this platform are not IT. 75% of our customers are not IT. And we'll say 50, probably two-thirds of my team here at Power Apps 91. So the people that get paid money to build other people's stuff are not IT. Allison came out of a nonprofit where she, has an MBA in economics and data, blah, right? But she was a number cruncher who tripped over Power Apps as a way to do her job better, who fell in love with Power Apps and quit her job. Joseph, he was in purchasing. He left purchasing to come build Power Apps. so many of the people that come into this space, to your point, are people that got excited about this and said, hey, I understand how the business works. I can go take a training class. I can go watch some YouTube videos. I've got 38 million views out there. There's a reason for that, because people want to learn this stuff, get better at this, and then improve their career.
Right. Right. Okay. So Shane, as you know, the last section of this is sort of that what's on your mind section. So nobody's asked us any great questions, although there's one in here. Let's read this really quick. Low code platform. Interesting. Yes, we did build a low code platform and helped generate things. And okay, cool. Using Chef. Interesting. All right. So at any rate, this is the what's on your mind section. So Shane, I'll turn it to you. What's on your mind in tech these days? It could be in the low code space or whatever, but what's making the brain churn?
Man, I have such a wealth of knowledge with you sitting here. Like I've got like 4 different questions I want to go with, but I'm gonna go with the one that you probably can answer for me better than anyone else, because the way that you guys sit kind of agnostically across clouds. In my world, I only hear Azure all the time, right? Like, I mean, right. I know when we first got in the cloud, it was AWS, and then Azure, this little thing, but I can't tell you the last time that a customer came to me and said they had AWS. And I just don't know, is that just because I live in a little Microsoft bubble and they're afraid I'll get offended? I mean, I know AWS is still a beast out there. Is it just all the net new people are finding Azure easier to slide into? Like, why is it that I don't ever hear AWS in my day-to-day anymore?
Well, I'm going to guess that the reason is because you're in a Microsoft application and you're coming at it from that Microsoft sphere, and because you still do find the lion's share. If you were to take a snapshot in the size of the clouds today, AWS is still larger than Azure. Azure is still larger than GCP, and GCP really trailing. And they find GCP used more in very niche scenarios, or at least gaining a lot of ground. Data. They're very big in data. They're very big in the analytics that go with the data. I think the other reason why you're hearing so much Azure, especially in your space, is as more companies move to the cloud, we're finding, when you and I first started into all of this and the cloud became a thing, those first companies to move out there were your startups. People were inventing their business out there, and some of them were transforming their business. And so the folks who are moving to the cloud now, I think, are moving their enterprises out to the cloud. And when we think enterprise, we tend to think Microsoft when we think about all that back end business. But maybe my advice to you is build some, go get an account in AWS and in Google and throw a couple of data services over there and use it as part of the training, and see how much wider your aperture goes when you have your AWS people coming in wondering how they can get the rest of their organization to utilize that data through the Microsoft platform.
Yeah, it's probably not a bad idea. I guess, one of the things I still struggle with is, as you were detailing for 10 minutes at the start of the show, right? All the changes, right? Things change so fast with the cloud. So it's no different with Power Apps, Power, and the rest of the Power platform that I live in, that I can barely keep up over there. So it's like this idea of learning something new is like, I can't, I'm behind. But I think your advice is completely sound. I need to suck it up. And
you know what, Shane? You got people for that.
That's true.
Somebody else can go write that. In fact, I know a company that specializes in helping organizations through their adoption of clouds they're not necessarily familiar with. Who could that? Oh, I know, it's Rackspace. So we tend to not be this is our thought leadership program. This is not meant to be too self-serving. There was a question around what Rackspace sees in this use, and so really my answer to Shane before was consistent with where we see our customer base as well. We don't play favorites by any stretch of the imagination. And here's the other interesting thing. More and more companies, in fact, I would say every company at this point, is a multi-cloud company. Everyone has a favorite. Everyone has a bunch of standbys or things they're working on, science projects in some cases. But everybody also uses a bunch of SaaS stuff. So that's the beauty of the Power Platform. That's the beauty of the low code, is these 500 and whatever connections allow you to bring all of that data in the context of a business process into it. I mean, think about, Shane, let's talk vacation request form. How many different systems you got to talk to there? We got to know who the person is. We got to know what their available balance is. If we go to Workday, we got to know, what's happening on the sales front. We're off to Salesforce to see if we can afford to let them leave. I mean, I can think of 15 different connections you might need to make to effectively do a process like that.
Yeah, I agree. It's so crazy. The other thing I don't ever think about, right, as a business owner, because I own Power Apps 911 on top of all this, but So I do. I live in that Microsoft bubble day in, day out. But, like my website is on Wix, right? And at the end of the day, Wix is hosted on AWS. So even if I don't admit it, I am in AWS. And I think that's where a lot of us kind of don't, we purposely don't think about that. And at the end of the day, you probably should be willing to admit that I care about all these clouds. I need all of them to run for my business to run.
That's right. And that's really the example. And that only gets compounded with the larger the business gets, the more services they're providing. Because my recommendation is still go SaaS before you try to write something. Use something that's already been done. All right, folks, we have come to the end of another fun session. We'll be back on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. Mark your calendars. It's going to be so exciting. Shane might even be in attendance. Maybe not. And but if you have any more questions about the Power App space, you saw that producer Daniel's been posting how to get a hold of Shane out there. Shane, any training coming up? Anything else you want to plug real quick?
I won't be in your session next week. I'll be teaching a SharePoint or Power Platform class for SharePoint people. Always doing. Always training, always doing that type of stuff. So I'm not going to miss next week because I don't want to be there. It's because I have to be somewhere else.
Because you got to be somewhere else. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Hey, and I am Jeff DeVerter. I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist here at Rackspace Technology. Shane, thanks for being a part of the program today. And everyone, we will be back on Tuesday and Thursday next week, 8:30 Central. You can find us on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and also over on Twitter. And know that all of the links to all the things we talked about will be provided in all of the descriptions in all of the places. So have a great day.
Bye.